My name is Grace Mukasekuru. I'm 38. I'm married and have a daughter. She's 5. Her name is Emanuela. I guess I can start with my life in Rwanda before the genocide. I had a happy childhood. I was very happy like any other child. I came from a big family of 11 siblings, so lots of kids. And the genocide, when the genocide happened, I was at home with my parents. I was 13 when the genocide happened. I was home with my parents, and the first memories I remember of the genocide is of my father, the look on my father's face, the morning of April 7th, I believe, the morning of April 7th when he heard the news of what had happened. And the reason I remember that image or the look on my father's face is because my father was always a happy person. I remember, as a child, I remember my father being a happy person, a smiling person. And that day he wasn't. He was not smiling at all. He was not happy. Something was troubling him. I came to find out later, what had happened. So in that moment, in that morning, my father left with my uncles and my older brother. And that would be the last time we saw them. We stayed home with my mom. Eventually, we had to leave the home, go in the hiding in the bushes, and then we'll come home at night. We did that for some time until we were no longer able to do that. And we were no longer able to do that because my home was burned down. When they couldn't find my father, they burned our home down. When they burned our house down, we had to we were running from home to home, trying to find anyone who was willing to hide us. So we went to a home, the man was willing to hide us. We stayed there with him for some time. And I was with my mom at that time, still with my mom and my siblings. And going back a little bit, as the memories now come to me, I remember the last meal that my mom made for us. Because I remember she cooked for us that day. She cooked for us. And I don't know, it's because the last meal we had with her, but I remember it being so good. We went to that man's home, and we were hiding there for some time. But eventually, when the killers, the perpetrator, found out he was hiding people, they would come and search. So when they came to search, would tell us to go hide. We'll go hide. We used to hide behind the bushes, wherever possible you can go. And so we'll hide, and at night we'll come to him, to his home. We did that until we couldn't do it anymore. One time they came to search, and we all ran our separate ways. And that was the last time I saw my mom alive. Actually, that was the last time I ever saw my mom, because we never saw her dead or alive. We never found her body or her remains. Her and my 2 younger brothers that she was with. Although in my heart, I believe one of them is out there, and I have always had that feeling. I never let that feeling go. I always feel like someone is out there. So to continue the story from there, we ran our separate ways. Eventually, I met my siblings, my younger brother and my younger sister. Her name is Letitia, and my brother's name is Joe. Eventually found ourselves in another hiding place. So we would do that. We would hide from places to places until we were no longer able to hide there. And then eventually, nobody was willing to hide us. So we found ourselves back to my uncle's home. And we're all hiding there with like 15 other people, family members, like aunts, uncles, cousins. Sorry, not uncles, aunts and cousins. And one night we were hiding there. One night they came to kill and where we were hiding. Someone knocked on the door and they asked us to come out, made us line up. And I remember one of the aunts offering money so they can spare our lives. And they agreed. They said, yeah, you give us money, nothing will happen to you. But it was a lie. She gave them the money, and she was the first to be killed. They killed her. They killed her daughter who was holding on to her, Francine. I remember, beautiful little girl. I want to say she was like 5 or 4. And they killed her. They killed the mom. And then it became chaos. We all started running. We realized, no, they're not going to spare our lives. They killed the other aunt and the children. And then for me, I got hit in the back of my head with like a baseball bat kind of weapon. And I got hit in the back of my head. I fell to the ground and I pretended I was dead. And in that process, when I was still on the ground, a young man was killed. And this young man used to work for our home, but he was also a Tutsi. They killed him and he fell on top of me. And so I lay there, I pretended to be dead. I tried my hardest so they would not notice that I was still alive, I was still breathing. And it helped that it was at night. I think it was not easy for them to see, or maybe they were not as alert to see who's dead or alive in that time. So I survived that night thinking I'm the only one who survived. It was so quiet. So they killed, and after they killed, they went to my uncle's home to go take things out of the home. Because they used to usually first kill the people and then they take their things. So while they were taking things out of the home, they heard the baby cry. My aunt had a baby on her back. They killed her, but the baby did not die. So they came back to finish, that's their term. They said to finish him off. They came, they killed him, and they left. And I remained on that ground for some time until I felt that it was safe to move. I moved into the home, into the house. I stayed there until the morning when the sun came up, and realized, like seeing the number of dead in the compound. And then I heard a sound. I heard like footsteps. And the footsteps was my younger sister, Letitia. She was not hurt, but she had been behind the house the whole time. She came from behind the house, and the look on her face is shock. I just remember vividly, like her face being in shock. And then we heard another sound, and then we were both, scared. And then we realized my brother also survived, but he had injuries. His hand was almost cut off. His shoulder had a wound from, like, I think a spear. And then my cousins, 2 of my cousins also survived, but survived with really bad head injuries. He was cut so many places in the head that eventually he died from his wounds. But while we were there, his sister also was there. She had like the machete cut her through her face like that, and she also had injuries on her head. My dress, I remember being fully covered in blood. My head felt like 10 kilos. It felt really heavy. But I went on the streets, and the people at the roadblocks, they were shocked to see us. Because I think they probably thought it was dead people walking around, because my cousin's head is wide open, my brother's bleeding, my head. So they saw us and they said, no, we don't want your blood on our hands. And they said, you better go before the others come back. When they come back, they'll kill you. While we were on that roadblock, I remember the French, like a French convoy of police, not police, but military vehicle come, and someone talking to them in French, trying to plead for them to take us, but they wouldn't take us. When they left, the guy told us, who was on the roadblock, he said, you better go. If you don't go, they'll kill you when they come. So we left from there, and we went our separate ways. Our cousin, or two cousins, went on their own because they wanted to go to their mom's side of the family, trying to find out if they can stay there. We went to another home where we thought it was a friend of the family. It was a Hutu, and we thought we can stay there. And when we got there, he was very welcoming. He was happy to see us. He took us in, and we stayed there for some time. But right away, they had to dress my brother in like a dress. They had to make him look like a girl. And we stayed there, and people would, the perpetrators, they would come. Now, going back a little bit, he was a Hutu, but he was married to a Tutsi. He had children who were mixed. So the Hutus who were coming to search the home, they will come and search the home, and then they will leave. So what they used to make us sit with all the children and let them search, and then they will leave. But my brother was so scared. On one occasion, he went and ran under the bed, and then something told me like to take him out, and I took him out. And moments later, they came and searched, and they put a spear or a sword or some sort under the bed, and the same place he had been. If he had not taken him out, they probably would have killed him and killed us also, realizing, oh, this, you know. So we survived that. We stayed there with him for some time. I can't say how many days. Eventually, we ended up in a place called Rebero, where RPF, the Tutsi army, had taken over. So they came to take us. They took us from the home. The RPF, the Tutsi, took us from the home, rescued us from the home, took us to Rebero, but it was not safe to stay there, so we had to move to another location, where another place called CND. We stayed there for some time, but even there was not safe because they were still throwing bombs in there. Actually, when we got there, some people died there, thinking they had survived. So from there, we went to the camps, the refugee. I don't know if I call it refugee camp, but the camps in Byumba. But before we got there, someone recognized us and said, "I know your uncle. Your uncle survived. He's with his family in Byumba." So when we went directly to my uncle and stayed with him. And when we were there, we stayed in a camp until the war was finished. And when the war ended, we came back to the capital in Kigali, and we stayed with him. We lived with them. But my sister had an older sister who was already in Canada, and that time when they found out that we survived, they started the process of trying to get us our papers to go to Canada. In '94, before the year ended, we went to Kenya to start the process of going to Canada. So we spent another year in Kenya before we went to Canada in 1995. And when we got to Canada, sometimes I tell people, the genocide lasted for 100 days. Approximately 1 million Tutsis were killed, and in 100 days. And that's bad, you know, you cannot describe what that means. But for me, sometimes I say that was only the beginning. For an orphan like myself, that was only the beginning of the struggle that followed. And I feel sometimes we talk about the genocide, and then it's as if it stops when the war ended. But it did not stop there. Because I actually feel that during that time of the genocide, somehow we're able to survive in the moment. But when you're no longer in that survival mode, the reality hits. You realize what it all meant. Realizing that your parents are no longer alive, both my parents. And when we left Rwanda, we never buried any of them. When I left Rwanda in '94, there were still dead bodies on the streets. There were still mass graves. So we were kind of taken away from this place, but that place never left me. So I struggled, and it was an internal struggle, because now I was taken from a place where everybody experienced what I experienced to a place where nobody knew what I experienced except for my siblings. So when I stepped out of the home, when I went to school, nobody knew. So the struggle you had was internalized. And it's another layer of struggle, because also the family that you go into, they themselves don't know how to help you. They don't even know where to start, or they sometimes don't want to open up that because they probably think they'll hurt you more than helping you, you know? So I went through a phase of like a good 10 years of internalizing the pain. I cried myself to sleep a lot in those 10 years. I had a really bad breakdown in high school, and it was in an English class. In an English class, we were reading a book. I think it's called To Kill a Mockingbird, if I remember. But all I remember was about the violence and the things that were happening in the book. And I remember in the class, for my classmates, it was just a book. And then after the book, we watched the movie. But for me, I was having visuals, like memories of what happened. So that was the first time I told anybody that about what happened. Like the school didn't know. The school where I was going to didn't know that we had experienced the genocide. So when when I broke down, my English teacher asked me why. I opened up to him, and then he took me to the counselor's office. And then the counselor suggested that I would seek counseling. And then, so the counselor arranged for counseling, like outside the school. But my family did not understand it the same. So I was not allowed to go for the counseling. So again, I had to internalize my feelings. I had to internalize what I was, the images, and now I can actually speak about it, because since I had my baby, I'm feeling like I'm starting to heal. At that time, I had a lot of guilt. I had a lot of guilt of why did I survive and they didn't. And that's something that never goes away, you know?